Let's bring in our panel of party commentators now to talk about the big story of the day. And that, of course, is the resignation of Andrew Scheer. Susan Smith is a Liberal commentator. Ashton Arsenault is a Conservative commentator. And Robin MacLachlan is an NDP commentator. It's good to see you all. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Let's start right there. Reactions to Andrew Scheer's resignation. Ashton, let me start with you. This is a big story in Conservative circles today. What do you think?
Yeah, look, a bit of a pre-Christmas surprise here. I don't think anybody saw it coming in advance of today. I'd be shocked if anybody did, and I wouldn't exactly take their word to the bank. I think everybody sort of resigned themselves to the fact that at this point, having sort of survived the first couple of weeks after the election and seemed to hunker down and name his new leadership team around him and give various caucus members promotions, that he was going to hunker in until April. I think there was still several questions remaining as to whether or not he'd be able to survive in April. Well, now the work's done for us, and we're off to find a new leader.
Is he right to be gone?
I think so. I think ultimately he didn't achieve the result that he had in mind, and certainly not a result that the members had in mind. He made some pretty significant progress. He got more MPs elected. He won the popular vote. But I think there was always going to be a dark cloud hanging over him. And the only way that that could have been resolved is with a resounding win in April. We're talking 85, maybe 90%. And at this point in time, he just didn't have the numbers.
What do you think of this today, Susan?
Well, I think the timing is very interesting, and there's a story that's attached to it about this secret pool of funds
to pay for
private school, and I don't even think the story on that lines up. So I think Mr. Scheer was in for, it was going to be very difficult for him to stay past April. I think the decision got made for him. It seems that there was a leak internally about this story that's been breaking. We can chat about that, and I have some thoughts about that, because the story on this private school funding is that there was money that was being a top-up that was going to him, but the board and the party, the rest of the Conservative fund, didn't know about it.
Although the executive director says it was that he offered it to Andrew Scheer, and that it was agreed to through the appropriate channels. The question is, I guess, how high up did it go?
But even the public story, if people go look at the statement that was put out by the party or the executive director of the fund, it says that it was top-up funding for Mr. Scheer from when he moved from Regina to Ottawa. Well, when he became leader. Well, Mr. Scheer went from being the speaker, and he was still an MP, and then he became the leader. I don't think he moved back to Regina and put his children in school and then uprooted them from Regina and brought them to Ottawa. So I still feel like there's holes in that story. But clearly somebody internally had it out for him and wanted him to go, and that's why this story came out.
Robin?
Well, I mean, I think Ashton's right that the only way he could have survived as leader is a result that was likely impossible at the April convention in terms of 90% or whatever that threshold would be. And we've seen already, long before the story Susan's referencing now, the knives have been out within the Conservative camp, whether that's through MPs themselves or through organizers, and some very senior organizers like Corey Tenaik and Jenny Byrne from the Harper days. And remember, you know, Andrew Scheer was very close to Stephen Harper, and when those organizers already have it out for you, you know that you're up against a steep hill, and that whether it's this story or some other story, it was going to be really hard for him to hang on to that. He had tried by getting rid of the campaign manager, by getting rid of his director of communication, I think, to take steps that caucus had told him were necessary. But at this point in time, you could tell that he was going to get knifed, just wasn't sure what that was going to be. And the oppo dump that Susan's talking about, I mean, it's bad enough we come out of a campaign where Liberals and Conservatives were throwing mud at each other the whole time. Now you've got the Conservative team itself dropping some opposition research on your leader. Hard to compete with that if you can't keep the home team together.
What do you think of how this has unfolded now? This is, I mean, it's this internal Conservative fight. You know, the suggestion from clearly his opponents is that he knew this story about the tuition was coming, and so that's why he picked today to announce his resignation. But is it an indication of how bad things were going to get? I mean, now we're into the tuition stuff. Clearly people are looking for things within the party, are looking for, you know, for all kinds of stuff they can throw at Andrew Scheer to make him go, and it looks like it worked. Is that, and what should Conservatives think about that?
I mean, it worked. I would say that I can't claim to know the ins and outs of whether or not one is inextricably tied to the other, so I won't go down that path. What I will say is that if it is in fact true what came out today, and then there is a serious amount of Conservative donor money that is going to Mr. Scheer in order to pay for the private education of his children, there is going to be several members that would be outraged by that.
Well, we've heard from some people
I
today
suspect
saying that's
people
not,
will-
that's not why I gave to the party. I don't give to the party to top up the leader's
Correct.
private education fund.
It's not why I give to the party. So I suspect that there will be several calling for a detailed accounting of that, who knew when, and I don't think, unfortunately, it's probably not the last we've heard of that story.
So I have two things I want to make. In terms of a leader having a top up, I don't think there's anything wrong with
And
a
it's not
leader
the
having
first time.
No, and I think, quite frankly, the leader can do whatever he or she likes with that top up. I don't think that that's unreasonable. If there was something secret or some side deal that from a governance perspective was not widely known to the party, that's a different story. Robin, you talked about knives being out, and so did you, Ashton. I'm not sure the last round of knives still isn't out for Mr. Scheer, because let's think about this. When Stephen Harper stepped aside as leader, the caucus voted to have an interim leader. The caucus could still vote and decide that they don't even want Mr. Scheer as the face of them between January and April.
And Corey Tenike, among others, is pushing for that, saying that we won't be able to raise money. He shouldn't be there anyway. There should be a new face. He should step aside.
So the bruises being inflicted on him by his own party are not yet done until there's a decision, until caucus decides whether or not they'd still like him or to be interim leader in the House. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
I guess given what's unfolded is unfolding, why would he want to stay? Why wouldn't he?
I don't know
Why wouldn't
wanna
he say,
stay.
"Look, I'm staying on as the MP, but I'm done
I mean,
with"?
Stornoway's a nice place to live.
Other than
tax-free.
Stornoway, and
I
people
agree
talk
with
about the
that.
top up to the salary.
I agree with Susan on this point. If what was reported today is in fact true, I think it makes it nearly impossible for him to hang on even till April or whenever the next leadership convention is going to be in an interim role. You will have caucus members deeply incensed by what was reported today. And you talk about knives, well, now people have axes.
Well, the other thing too is you got to look at today from a micro crisis communication standpoint. So, Susan touched on this. It's not coincidental the timing this came out. I mean, there were a lot of reasons that conservatives and others have suggested Andrew Scheer should step down. The fact that there was an embarrassing story about to come out is likely the reason. And what you do in a crisis communication situation, you try to get ahead of the story. So he got ahead of the story that he was resigning, but he didn't get ahead yet of the story of what's to come out. So if there's more to come out, as my colleagues here have mentioned, that means it could get worse. And he has yet to try to get out and control the narrative about what was going on. Because as Susan says, if this was simply a matter of him having a salary top-up and he happened to use that salary top-up to go to the private schools, that's not really a story, and he should get ahead of that. If it is, however, there was something incendiary happening around going against the governance rules or the operations of donors' money, then that's something that goes to the crux of what it is to be a conservative in terms of kind of managing that money and grassroots support. So he can't hold that position if this story continues or it gets worse.
Just quickly, I'll say that Dustin Van Voot, the executive director of the party, deeply honorable man. I will take him at his word when he says that nothing improper and untoward happened here with respect to allocation of monies. But even still, the fact that board members are claiming, National Council members, the Conservative Fund operates in a board with oversight. The fact that they didn't know about it is deeply alarming to me, and it will not sit well with a lot of
couple of
hardliners.
minutes that we have left. Well, how does this, Rob, let me start. How does this change the dynamics with Andrew Scheer, with now the Conservatives looking for a new leader? What changes?
I've thought about this afternoon, and I think there's a number of things that change, both within the Conservative camp, but also in Parliament. And you've just lost the official opposition in a minority Parliament, and the first one that we've had is a Liberal minority Parliament since Paul Martin. So you've also got a Bloc Québécois leader that seems just content to make sure this Parliament lasts as long as possible. So from an NDP perspective, which I'm here often to speak to, there's really a moment here for Jagmeet Singh that he has to seize, that he can be, in effect, the most secure opponent to this government on progressive issues. And he has to stand up. He knows the Bloc Québécois is likely going to support a lot of these confidence measures, so he has to really use that moment to secure a narrative around opposing what the government isn't doing. Because Andrew Scheer was always going to be singing a different tune anyway, but now the Conservatives are going to be in a bit of disarray, and it's a moment that Jagmeet Singh has to seize. Just very quickly for the Conservatives, though, they have to make sure this isn't about, and I was talking about this before, like the Liberal problems in the past where Ignatieff was just supposed to be a better version of Dion and slapping a new leader and winning an election. They still have to go to that April policy convention and figure out what are the reasons that Canadians rejected us on carbon pricing, on women's issues, on progressive issues. And that's something they have to figure out before they get a new leader.
Are the Liberals upset that Andrew Scheer is going to be out?
It would be nice if he'd stayed till April. The longer the disarray, the better.
That's candid.
Look, I think the Prime Minister was very magnanimous in speaking about Mr. Scheer today in the House. I was shocked. My inside voices might want to say, oh wait, you can't go work in insurance. Oh, good thing you didn't give up your American citizenship. And the Prime Minister took a very, very high road and talked about family, which was very nice. Look, from a Liberal perspective, the Conservative Party will be in disarray. So the government will be trying to move forward on its agenda with the throne speech and when we see the mandate letters, and I think they'll be able to take advantage of it. The interesting thing will be, what does this do to the timing of the next election? It won't speed it up in the immediate term, but will it cause the Prime Minister to go back to the polls sooner if there's a new leader that's trying to find their feet? Well, it remains to be seen, but nobody has to worry about that yet.
Right, not just
Think
yet.
Stockwell Day.
Yeah, think Stockwell. Well, you gave him a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Give him a few weeks, Christmas,
right.
whatever.
I'd say a couple of things quickly. There is no shortage of candidates fully, likely willing, but certainly ready and able to take over the helm of the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. I look forward to that contest in the near future. But in the short term, as Robin was alluding to, there are some mechanical things here that are now in question from a parliamentary perspective. We don't have committee membership lists yet. We don't know, who's going to be sort of taking lead within caucus, and a lot of that is going to be determined around confidence in the leader. And after today, things become a bit tricky.
Okay.
And very quickly, there's
You
two
and I
wings
both
to this
think,
party, right? There's more of a progressive wing to the
Yeah.
Conservatives and a conservative wing to the Conservatives, and they're going to have to manage that messaging as they continue to present themselves, or try to present themselves, as a credible alternative, just with waiting for a leader.
All right, thank you all. Talk again.
Thanks,
Thank
Peter.
you.